Hey guys, we're Blonde95, recording live from the Low County Prison Cell. Before we start this, let me say it was very difficult finding a thumbnail that would be acceptable for this video, and oddly enough, doing research wasn't very easy either, due to the nature of one of these series that I'm about to talk about. That being said, I would like to talk about a fight that I've seen a couple of times, but I never really decided to put it in, until sort of recently. And that is Yumi from Senran Kagura versus Yukiko Amami, or Amagi, I think her name, from Persona, specifically Persona 4. This is gonna be a tough one to talk about. Funnily enough, this is kind of like Weiss and Mitsuru, where this is doable in, playable. This is playable in BlazBlue Cross Tag, but it's they have interactions in that, but they don't really there's not a rivalry or anything. So yeah, but this is, I could see that, you got a fire and ice gimmick, fans, if you like fans, this is some fan service going on here. Because of the fans, because, fanning yourself. Yeah, fans. But yeah, and you've got, they both do summons. They both, friendship's a big thing in both of them. Yeah, I don't know of any personal connection. You could, okay, if gun to my head, had to come up with a story-based connection for these two. Yumi went out of her way to become powerful due to her lineage, and then chose to follow in the footsteps of her lineage, as in try to just be at peace with herself, and right, and Yukiko was being forced into her lineage by having to, run the inn, and depending on the story, I think in the official canon story, she ends up just choosing to follow the path because she enjoys it, not because she's being forced into it. She, chooses to run the inn. So, I guess you could say, yeah, they're both two people who, struggled with their lineage and then come to terms with it. But that is a very long stretch. I think it's mostly just the fact that they dance and they have fans. So anyway, Yumi is from Senran Kagura, a very story, plot, character development based series. Very intricate and very deep, nuanced series, about ninjas, female ninjas, all of them female ninjas, but ninjas, and Yumi is specifically, she's one of the main characters. One of the main characters, and she ends up being the leader of not only a group of ninjas from her own school, but also a member of a team composed of team leaders. So she is a very heavy hitting character, and she is the sort of friendly rival to, what's her name, Asuka, I believe, who is. Yeah, so basically, her parents died when she was 8, and her parents were shinobi, and she decided to follow the path of the shinobi, not to honor them or anything, but just because she felt like she had to find out the reason for her parents' death, because nobody would tell her. She then met her grandfather, who happened to be the rival to the great rogue ninja Hanzo, and her grandfather, for those who don't know Japanese history slash pseudo tall tale mythology, Hanzo is a legendary ninja figure historically as well. And her grandfather ended up being training her, not so much to help her with her revenge, but really just to teach her the real like cost of power, the values necessary. The whole great power comes great responsibility thing, and also just like what is the whole Japanese lesson of you have the power, what is it for? That sort of thing. So she ends up at a huge pace, or a very quick pace, learning to learning all of the different secret techniques and everything, and basically not surpassing her grandfather, but just really at an astonishing rate being able to learn from him. I think it was within a year she could do all of the different techniques that he could do, but just not nearly to his level. And he then taught her that power isn't everything and does not solve everything. And by demonstrating the difference between his and her power, he said, even though I have all of this power, I still wasn't able to meet you until your parents died. So power didn't solve that problem. But the techniques that she ends up learning are all ice focused, right? So she's able to she fights with these metal fans, and she complements that with an ice fighting style where she can generate gusts of wind that are capable of freezing enemies. She can create ice on the floor that she can like slide around on, which she's very quick and has like really good maneuverability options. She's able to send shards of ice at the opponent. She's able to make giant chunks of ice appear out of the ground. She's able to, she can create like a kind of, these winds that she generates, she can create like a cyclone with them by spinning them around and create like a vortex that absorbs enemies. And then she has two ultimate techniques. One of which is by harnessing the power of nature, she can create her spirit animal avatar, which is a giant snow mountain spider known as White Widow. Now, these avatars are only good for basically singular attacks. They can only really they don't stick around because they're being manifested by the person's own, they're kind of like what is it called? It's not like chakra or chi or anything, but it's their own, in sync with nature. But they're only able to be generated for a short period of time and do singular attacks, basically. They don't, have a kaiju battle with each other. But yeah, she ends up being able to summon White Widow, who can create, again, these even bigger kind of gusts of wind that just freeze everything in their vicinity. And then her secondary ultimate technique is her, what do they call it? It's a form where instead of unleashing it in the form of an avatar, she basically absorbs it into herself and uses it to power up, and this is called Ice Queen. So her hair comes out, she gets a giant ice blade, and her movement speed, her power, her her freezing and everything gets amplified multiple times over. Like, she is able to cross a vicinity she's able to cross an area of space and do multiple attacks in it within a matter of seconds, kind of like Strider style. And she's able to take out individual enemies that would normally just take heavy damage from her attack. She's able to one-shot them. So her power level goes up a lot. But again, this form can only last for, 30, 45 seconds or something like that. It is not like a permanent transformation. But still, Yumi is a very accomplished ninja, and she's able to, she's able to go hand to hand with many other very accomplished ninja, and she's very good hand to hand despite her emphasis on ice and her, actual like nimpo, like ninja magic sort of stuff. She's very, she is very good hand to hand and have beaten other notable hand to hand combatants within the series. She's taken shots that were like able to like destroy mountains and stuff. So she's done a lot of really, big things in the series. Yukiko. So Yukiko is a member of the it's been forever since I played Persona 4. I don't know. The group of kids from Persona 4. I forget what they're at. The investigation team or something, I believe they're called. So Yukiko is best friend to Chie, friends with becomes friends with everyone, but she was friends with Yosuke at first, kind of through association with Chie. But she was she was kind of running her family's in, and being obedient because her parents were expecting that of her and kind of making her do it. And then all the stuff from Persona 4 goes down, one of which is her encountering her shadow self, which took the form of a delicate princess in a birdcage, symbolizing that she felt like she was being protected and trapped in her life at all times, and that she was, basically not allowed to any freedom for herself or allowed to, do anything that she wanted. She was being told, you are to do this and you are great for doing it. So she kind of, had this guilt of not wanting to leave, but she also just felt like she was being suffocated. After overcoming that, she unlocks her initial persona, Konohana Sakuya. Now, one thing I do want to state here is that Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is the... Persona 4 Arena and a Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is the canonical sequel to Personas 3 and 4. So, and all of the other character endings within Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden are just that. They're just possible endings depending on the player's choice. They're not the canonical ending for each individual character. So, I only bring this up because in every Persona game, you can ascend your persona to a higher level. And Mitsuru and company, I bring Mitsuru up because she was in a death battle. Mitsuru and company had Artemisia, and they all had their, their ascended personas, but the Persona 4 characters didn't. Now, I think that's to represent, the Persona 3 characters had, grown up and, gotten older and had, they had their transformed personas because of that, because they were more experienced. But the Persona 4 characters, this takes place right at the end of the game, and we are assuming that with the exception of you having Izanagi no Okami, that everyone else has what they have in Ultimax, which means Yukiko in this fight, if I was being fair and I was going by that, she would just have Konohana Sakuya. She wouldn't have its ascended forms, Amaterasu, and also something Akami. I don't remember what it's called. They essentially all have the same abilities. The ascended forms just have better stats and that would translate to being more powerful. I guess you would just use the stats as a multiplier in that case. But no, in this case, I would just go for Konohana Sakuya. Now, Konohana Sakuya is a fire-based persona. It uses, like rose petals and cherry blossoms and things like that to kind of use pyrokinetic attacks. So it's able to, whenever it's hitting you with cherry blossoms, you're actually being burned by fire. And it can also do other things, like it can do heavy fire damage. It has like these very big fire attacks. But it also is a very efficient healing persona, which makes Yukiko more of a support character. But in addition to healing, it can also, um, what is it? It can manually power up its own fire attacks and also reduce the opponent's resistance to fire. Essentially doing the same thing and making the fire attacks more effective. I think it only matters, again, from a damage calculation sort of standpoint in game, but basically she has two options to enhance her own fire moves. Now, I bring this up because going into the analysis for this fight, there's not a lot of options for Yumi here. Now, granted, Yumi does have some advantages. Yukiko does fight with fans and things, but she's not really much of a fighter. Like, she's not much of a trained fighter. Whereas Yumi was trained since the age of 8. She was trained for like a decade, to be like, and she's, a prodigy at being a ninja. So she's been at this a lot more. She has a lot more hand-to-hand experience. And also, with Ice Queen, she can manually power herself up that she would be able to just obliterate Yukiko in one hit if she got to her. Well, I didn't realize my hand was that close. That being said, Yukiko pretty much has the advantage in every other place, and yes, people are going to point out that this is a fire versus ice fight. Now, I don't normally mind doing fights where a person's weak to another person inherently, like like Pokemon style, but normally it's like, okay, these two are pretty equally powerful, regardless of that. Like, I did Esdeath versus Cinder, that's another fire-ice fight. I still think that could go either way. And we don't know that Yumi herself is weak to fire or anything, right? She just uses ice attacks, so there's no reason to think that, like she's not made of ice. She's not going to melt or anything. So, in this case, you could kind of, neglect that a little bit. Obviously, fire is going to melt ice. But even if this was on neutral territory, like, even if Yukiko was attacking with something that wouldn't naturally melt ice, she still has the ability to power up her fire and reduce Yumi's resistance to it, effectively making the, elemental matchup not really relevant, because she's always going to have that ability to, create that sort of advantage. The only way that wouldn't be the case in this fight if Yumi were somehow resistant to fire, which she is not. So, yeah, like, Yukiko has this ability to kind of, make fire her opponent's weakness anyway. Her opponent doesn't have to naturally have a weakness. But aside from that, the obvious counter to a persona in this case, being Konohana Sakuya, would be, the summoning of White Widow. But unlike personas, the Guardian Avatars in Senran Kagura are only usable for short periods of time. Whereas Yukiko can kind of fight with Konohana Sakuya, and yes, it does take, like, a natural energy from her, but, like, it does exhaust her to have it, and any damage that would be done to her would be done to... well, no, it's not any damage that would be done to her. It just takes a physical and mental toll on her body if Konohana Sakuya is broken. But as we see with the Persona fight, even if Konohana Sakuya gets broken, she'll just have to wait a little bit to summon it again, whereas it takes a large amount of energy to summon White Widow, so it's not something that Yumi would be able to just do multiple times. I think it's like they slowly gather energy from nature, like from their environment. So, yeah, Yumi would be able to do it and, like, regather energy, but it wouldn't be something she can do rapidly, unlike Yukiko. And even if she could, Yukiko can just keep her persona out unless it gets broken. So Yukiko just has this advantage in terms of the summon fight here, which I think is the determining factor, because even though we could argue that Yumi could go into Ice Queen and just one-shot, Yumi, I don't think she's gonna just let that. I don't think she's gonna let that happen when she has a persona. And there's also the healing aspect, which was kind of the determining factor of White Mitsuru as well, where like Yukiko can just heal herself, and the whole time that she's not using these two very powerful, very costly techniques that she could use to kill Yukiko, Yukiko's gonna have a persona versus a regular person. So it's not real. Like, I feel like that natural advantage is enough. This kind of has a bit of the. One of the reasons they didn't want to do this fight is this kind of has a bit of the JoJo's problem. And I don't like making JoJo's comparisons to Persona because I don't like doing JoJo's Persona fights except for a few cases where I've done it. But the JoJo's problem is the stand user almost always wins unless the opponent is either A, super overpowered to the point where the stand isn't an auto win, or they somehow have a way to interact with the stand. And this is the same sort of issue with the Persona. Yumi has a summon that can fight the Persona, but because it operates on just objectively less convenient rules than the Personas do, that's kind of the win right there. Like the rest of the fight isn't really an issue. But yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one to Yukiko though. Very proud of myself for keeping this appropriate, let's say. And anyway, Verbal 95. See ya.